Welcome to Manifested Publishers. My name is Mr. Dongo, an economics lecturer. Today we would be going through economics paper that is December 2023, and we begin with question 1. So question 1, Roman 1, question 1A, Roman 1. Explain the term economic planning. 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 So the question is basically 2 marks. That is under a topic economic growth and development, to be precise. So the first thing is to understand what is basically economic planning. We say that economic planning is what we call utilization of policy instrument by government to basically achieve a desired objective. I've said utilization of policy instruments by the government for the purpose of achieving what we call a desired objective, but within a specified period. That is what we mean by planning. Utilization policy instrument by the government for the purpose of achieving what we call a desired objective, and this desired objective must be achieved within a specified period. We put it down. We say this is the utilization policy instrument by the government for the purpose, we say for the purpose of achieving a desired objectives within, we say within a specified period. We say within a specified period. Utilization policy instrument by the government for the purpose of achieving a desired objective within a specified period. So very important also to emphasize on that some of the questions that could emanate from that very question, we say that you can be asked advantages of economic planning. What are the benefits that would accrue if there is economic planning? What are the features or characteristics of a good plan? That is are also major areas that learners can be assessed on. That is how we can fully exhaust that particular question. We'll pick it on the next question. That is particularly question 1A, but Roman 2. 1A, Roman 2. We read the question, then you put it on the board. Argue 4 cases in favor of government investment. Argue 4 cases in favor of government investment in the process of economic planning. So we put it down. Argue, we say argue 4 cases in favor of government investment in the process of economic planning. In the process of economic planning. Still, the very first question is tied to the 1A and 1A Roman 2, still touching on economic growth and development. So the next question basically talks about in favor to main advantages of basically investing in economic planning. We can talk about the first factor, advantages. It helps in what you call equitable distribution, equitable distribution of income and wealth stroke resources. That is the first argument in favor of government basically investing. We say the government putting resources or putting money into economic planning helps to ensure equitable distribution of income and resources stroke wealth. So one we say helps to ensure, we say helps to ensure equitable distribution of income and resources stroke wealth. When the government basically invests in economic planning, that is one of the advantage or argument in favor of that. The second we can talk about, the government is able to attract foreign aid. You remember that one of the most important things that donors look at is planning. Is this government or economic systems basically having good plans? So when government basically invests in economic planning, they're able to attract what you call foreign aid. Economic planning can attract. Next is economic planning can attract what you call foreign aid. Economic planning can basically attract a foreign aid as a second point. The next thing that we need to also look at, again, when there's good plans in an economic system, one of the things that happens is that what you call economic stability. So the third point would be economic stability, enhance or maintain economic stability. So we say maintain what you call economic stability. Maintain economic stability as the third point in favor of economic planning. We also need to, when we have a good plans in place, it is able to eliminate what we call macroeconomic problems. What are these macroeconomic problems? For example, unemployment. It enables the government to eliminate, enables the government to eliminate macroeconomic problems such as unemployment, macroeconomic problems such as unemployment. And lastly, we can talk about helps a country in decision making on how basically we can allocate resources. So we can put that down. It helps inform a country. It helps inform a country's decision making on how resources can be utilized in a systematic manner. Inform a country how resources can be utilized in a systematic manner. As we close on that question 2, question 1, Roman B, very important to know that I have put down that question particularly touches on a topic called economic growth and development. And again, I also emphasize on a number of areas that also need to be assessed, as learners that you need to look at. What are what are the features of good plans? What are the features of these good plans? Again, we can ask ourselves, could we have disadvantages to this economic planning? That is also areas that learners can look at or learners can assess. And that is how we particularly handle that question. That is question 1A, Roman 2. We'll pick it on the next question. That is at December 2023, question 1, but now Roman B. Read the question. Examine the roles of central bank in an economy. We put it down. Examine, that is B, examine the role of central bank in an economy. Examine the role of central bank in an economy. Particularly if you look at this question, one of the things that we must realize, or one of the things that we must understand, that this question particularly touches on a topic that is called money and banking. This topic touches on what we call money and banking. And number one, we need to understand that when you talk about central bank is basically what we call the government banks. Apart from central bank, we also have what we call commercial banks. Central bank has some unique features. There's some unique features or some unique functions that are not as the same as the commercial bank. So when you ask the role, one of the unique roles that we know that does not appear, we know that issue currency, notes, and coin. That is the first role. We say issue, we call it issue, currency, what do you call currency? Currency notes, and coins. Issue, what you call currency notes and coins. Issue, currency notes and coins. The second, we need to know that this is a government bank. So it's a government banker to the government, banker to the government. What you call the banker to the government. And what does the word banker to the government basically imply? It maintains all government accounts. One of it is basically maintain. We know that maintains all governments accounts. This basically maintain all government account. Deposits or deposits. We have deposits, comma, transfers, deposits, transfers, etc. So that is the second role of the central bank. We have the next, we call it lender. We call it lender of the last resort. Lender of the last resort as the next role of the central bank. Lender of the last resort. Commercial bank often with sudden need. Commercial banks, we can know that commercial are often with the sudden need, with the sudden, what do you call the sudden needs, are often with the sudden needs, If all resources fail, we say if all the resources, we basically say if all the resources failed, central bank would step to lend the commercial bank. The central bank would basically come in to lend the commercial banks. That's why we say it's a lender of the last resort. Number 4, we can talk about what we call central bank implement monetary policy. When you look at that in relation to other commercial banks, we look at commercial banks assisting the central bank in implementing monetary policy. But you say when you talk about commercial banks, they're basically assisting in implementation, but it's the central bank that implement monetary and physical policy. So we can say central bank implements, for we can say implement, implement what you call the monetary policies. And when you talk about monetary policy, this leads with the interest rate selling and buying of treasury bills and bonds, government reserves, then thereby regulating. Thereby, we know that when they implement thereby regulating what we call money supply in the economy, thereby regulating money supply, what we call the money supply, thereby regulating money supply in the economy, thereby regulating money supply in the economy. So we can have the next, where we talk about is responsible. Central bank is responsible. We can say responsible for buying, what you call for buying and selling. The responsible for buying and selling. The responsible for buying and selling government securities. Government, what do you call the government? Government securities. Securities. Such as, what do you call such as the T-bills. T-bills. Such as the T-bills. Such as the T-bills. And T-bonds. And T-bonds. And T-bonds. They offer selling and buying of the government security, such as T-bills and T-bonds. But we can also talk about the create employment. Create what you call create employment. Because in the central bank, we know that a number of individuals are basically employed. But in summary, as we summarize what we have basically put on the board, it is very important for learners to understand that also another area that is examinable is the area of the commercial banks. What does the commercial banks do? We've looked at the roles of the central bank. What does basically the commercial banks role they play in an economy? And it's also a very good area that normally is being tested in almost all particular questions, all particular series or particular examination period. You have a question that relates on monetary and physical policy. How do we use monetary policy to control money supply in the economy? So if you look at all those that we have discussed, that will be a very, a very good way to look at that question. And that is how we particularly assess that question. We pick it on the next question, that is December 2023, question 1, Roman C. So it says that describe 4 characteristics of a perfectly competitive market. Describe, say describe 4, what you call 4 characteristics. Describe 4 characteristics of a perfectly competitive market. So the first thing always is to particularly address the area that this particular question has come from. This question has basically come from the last topic that is in microeconomics, that is the market structure. And on market structure, it has particularly talked or looked at one of the market structure, that is perfectly competitive market structure. So perfectly competitive market structures has a number of features or characteristics. One of it, we know that goods sold, we need to understand that goods sold are homogeneous. When you say homogeneous, we basically means identical. That goods sold are basically identical. That the goods that are sold are basically identical. The next we can talk about, there is perfect communication and knowledge. Perfect communication and knowledge about the market. there is perfect, what we call perfect communication, and knowledge, and what we call knowledge about the market. There's perfect communication and basically knowledge about the market. There's perfect communication and knowledge about the market. We can also talk about these free entry and exit. Free entry and exit. Free entry and exit into and out of the market. And this explains why, particularly under the short run, you will basically see this when the farms are making losses. Most of the farms would definitely be quitting the industry. Then we have what we call, there's no preferential treatment. There is no preferential, what we call preferential treatment, i.e. no discrimination or favoritism in this kind of a market. But also very important to understand is that in this particular market, there is no transportation, and we can also talk about as a characteristics, normal profits are being made in the long run. Normal profits are being made in the long run. Normal profits are basically being made in the long run. Those are some of the characteristics of this particular market that has been assessed. But also very important for a learner to put at the back of the mind is how do we draw the structures in the short run? What happens to this kind of market? In the long run, what happens to this particular market? You can also ask a number of questions, how does a number of markets, for example, monopoly work? How does monopolistic competition work? How does oligopoly work as you get through this question? And that is how we particularly handle that question. We look at the last question, that is on question 1, that is 1D. We say that explain 5 causes of rising foreign debt in the least developed countries. We put it down. Explain, that is 1D. Explain 5 causes of rising, what they call the rising foreign debt, rising foreign debt in least developed countries. Least developed country. So when you talk about debt, we talk about borrowing that is actually initiated by this least developed countries that have not gotten to the level of the most developed country. And for this particular question, we are asking, you are being asked particularly what leads to this rising debts in this particular least developed country. What will lead to the rise of debt in these least developed countries? One, we can talk about what you call bad macroeconomic policies. Bad macroeconomic policies. So the policies that are basically put, in these particular countries are not effective in that, they're not able to raise enough funding for this country, and that will lead to what we call the rising debt level, that they have to borrow a lot from the foreign countries. We can talk about what we call poor weather condition and climate change. What we call poor weather condition, and climate change. So when you have issues to do with prolonged period of drought, i.e., we can just give that example, i.e., prolonged, we say prolonged period, we call it prolonged period of drought. So when you have a prolonged period of drought, it means that we cannot do farming. You know that these least developed countries are heavily dependent on agriculture. So if agriculture, which is a major economic activity, they're not able to carry it out, what happens is that they will be forced to borrow from these foreign countries. We can look at the next and say that worsening oil prices. Worsening oil prices. A lot of times people do not understand that as the oil prices definitely shoots, one of the things that basically happens is that, that will lead to a country borrowing. So to put it down, to say that a large proportion, we call it a large proportion of the national income, is used in purchase of oil. A large proportion of the income is definitely used in the purchase of oil. A large proportion is definitely used in the purchase of oil. A large proportion is used in the purchase of oil. So if a country, these least developing countries, basically spend a lot of the money in the purchase of oil, it means that they will be left with no money. So therefore, what remains is that they have to definitely borrow. So we say that this might force the developing countries. This might force the developing countries to borrow other funds from foreign countries. That's the third reason why there's a rise in those. Then we can talk about low export earning. And particularly, we know that when the export of a country is less as compared to the import, then therefore a country will be trading on what we call a deficit. If a country is trading on a deficit, it means that the country has to borrow in order to fund its operation. So we can also talk about what we call trade policies. We can have what we call trade policies. And we ask ourselves, how does the trade policies basically lead to borrowing? So we can note and say this leads to growth. This leads to the growth of public debt. This leads to the growth of public debt, where policies such as import substitution, where the policies such as import substitution, which is less efficient and effective, forces a country to borrow to finance them. Then you can talk about lastly what you call the interest rates. Interest rates. So if the interest rates on borrowing are basically very high, what happens to these developing countries that they'll be forced to borrow in order to be able to cater for its needs? So interest rates is also a factor that will lead to borrowing, more borrowing. If, for example, the loans that are taken are at a high interest rate, higher interest rate, this will lead to more borrowing. So we say this worsens. We say this worsens. The debt management, what you call the debt management. This worsens the debt management. Since we say the cost of servicing becomes huge, headache to the country, to the borrower. And particularly we know that these developing countries, they keep on borrowing. Why? Because they have loans that are financing at a very interest rate. So they have to keep on borrowing to cover loans that are very immediate, the ones that are required in the immediate. So they keep on borrowing because of the interest rate, higher interest rate on those loans. So they have to keep on borrowing in order to cover the loans that are due, and keep on borrowing again to cover the loans that are also due maybe in the future. So that these are a number of factors that will basically tell us why there's a rising debt among least developing countries. Increasing debt, causes of debt, rising foreign debt by the least developing countries. That is how we particularly handle that last question. That is 1 Roman D. That marks the end of this series, the end of this question. We'll see one another in the next session. Goodbye.